Hey everybody, this is John, and I am back after a trip to Nicaragua, which was very interesting. I'll tell you guys more about it later. What I wanted to do though is now I'm getting my feet back into the markets, and it's what's one thing that's nice about being away from the markets for a couple of days and really just not looking at them is coming back completely neutral and just kind of looking at the markets with a fresh perspective and seeing what's going on. So I look at the weekly chart here. We are spending 1, 2, 3 days against that upper voodoo line. And in terms of the daily chart, it's acting very bullish. We've had this, of course, the huge reversal here. This V-shaped bottom, something that hasn't happened in 35 years, that type of a pattern. And now we're just consolidating at the highs. That's super, super bullish. And if we look at the Russell, which is the index that was the most concerning because it was really leading the way lower, you can see here that it's acting pretty awesome as well. The main thing for me that was important is that it did break through this downward trend line. I think that happened on the day that I was flying. And now we are consolidating at the fire line here, which is just kind of pushing through some resistance here. So again, just very, very, very bullish in terms of how it's acting. And then if I go through and I look at key stocks like Baidu, Baidu is just, the stocks that are making new all-time highs right now are pretty solid. I'm looking for Baidu to go pretty much right into that fire line there without too many major setbacks. You can see we spent some time consolidating here between these two tree lines, and now it's time for itself to work its way up to that fire line. Okay? And what continues to be interesting here is if we look at the Japanese yen, of course, the Japanese yen just continues to crater, and as long as it's heading lower, stocks are going to head higher, and that's the simple math of that. And other stocks like Priceline also trying to make pretty significant comebacks here and essentially trying to fill their what I call their earnings gaps. And there's a lot of stocks that have these earnings gaps where they're just trying to come back up and fill it. Netflix was also trying that, though it's having a tough time. It just can't get any momentum going. But a lot of these other stocks that gap down for earnings are actually having a pretty significant move. And this kind of setup to me is particularly interesting because there's a very, very, very high probability that it's going to do one of two things. One, that it's going to come back up and fill the gap, or two, that's going to come up and take out the lows with this specific pattern. And this is something that's it's the best way to take advantage of something like this is a combination of a couple of different debit spreads, which is something that I really like to do in something like this. A lot of times people think like, whoa, well, maybe you should just buy a straddle, but it's typically way, way too expensive, and you need an outside move for it to make any money, and you actually end up having to put up a lot of capital, whereas you can do something with a combination of debit spreads. You have a lot less capital at risk and a much higher probability of reward. And then also on something like a Priceline type stock where the options are typically ridiculously expensive, you can come in and use a combination of debit spreads to completely reduce your overall cost, but still get the same exposure to some pretty nice upside moves. And then what's also great about smaller stocks like Intel that have lower volatility is you can actually do what's called ratio spreads to even get into a situation where you can set up almost a no cost to a credit, and then also have a very simple way to defend that trade if it starts going through your strikes. So with all that being said, I'm going to be doing a free webinar focusing just on debit spreads on Wednesday. That's Wednesday, November 12th at 8 o'clock East Coast time, which of course is 7 o'clock Central. If you go to simpleroptions.com/debit spreads, it'll take you to this page. You can just do your first name and your email, and you'll get registered for the webinar. I'm going to be talking about how to buy options for a fraction of the price so you can cut your risk, what the benefits are to trading debit spreads, so you know whether or not debit spreads are right for you, what trading vehicles to use for debit spreads so you're not trading debit spreads on the wrong side of the tracks, the guidelines to discovering if trading debit spreads is right for you so you know what account size, risk tolerance, and experience levels you need, for consistent results. And then what are the major pitfalls of trading options for income so you know what common mistakes to avoid. So again, free webinar Wednesday, 8 o'clock. And this one will be fun. A lot of cool stuff coming up, especially with the last 2 months of 2014 right on our tail, where some of the best trading typically occurs. All right, we'll see you guys on Wednesday. Have a good night, and we'll see you at the next update.